This is Mrs. Wainwright's Math Class, Chapter 3, Lesson 13, Find a Rule and Continue a Sequence. Today's learning target: by the end of the lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can find a rule to describe a pattern and continue the sequence when necessary. Let's take a look at example number 1. Example number 1 says, find the rule that matches the function of each machine, then fill in the empty box. And I say I have box A and B. So they're saying the function of the machine. Well, if I focus in on box A, it has an input and an output. The first input is blank, so I don't think that's going to help me. The next input is 60, the output is 67. Then I have 51 as the input, the output is 58, and it continues that way. Let's move to the next page and just focus on box A first. So if they're telling me this is a machine and I need to find the rule, if I input the certain number into the machine, apply the rule, I should get the output, and that same rule will work for the entire machine. So first thing I need to do is find a rule. And we know from earlier in this chapter, in order to find a rule, we have to see if our numbers are getting larger or smaller. If the numbers are getting larger, this will be either an addition or multiplication rule, because when we add or multiply, our answers get larger. If the numbers are going down or getting smaller, this will be a subtraction or division rule, because when we subtract or divide, our answers get smaller. So as always, I'll set myself up for my rule. And if we remember back to that other lesson, rules always have two parts. If I look at the inputs that are given to me and the outputs, I see 60 turns into 67, 51 turns into 58, 73 turns into 80, and 66 turns into 73. My numbers are getting larger, therefore this needs to be either an addition or multiplication rule. So under the first blank of rule, I'll write plus or times. I like to start with addition first, if it's addition or multiplication, and check it out, see if it's an addition rule. If it is, great, and if it isn't, then I try multiplication. So I'm going to take a guess here. I'm going to say, maybe this is an addition rule. Therefore, I'll put a plus sign and a question mark on my line. Now I know in order to find the second blank in a rule, whether it's addition or subtraction, I need to take any two numbers within the rule and subtract them. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to focus in on this first part of my machine where it has both an input and an output number, and my numbers are 60 and 67. I know I have to subtract from my second blank, and when I subtract, my larger number goes on top. So I'm going to say 67 minus 60. Let's see what I get. 7 take away 0 is 7. 6 to 8 take away 6 is nothing. So maybe my rule is plus 7. As always, I have to check my rule to make sure that it works. So that's going to be part B, which says test the rule. I never want to test with the numbers that I used to find my second blank, so I'm going to take a different grouping of numbers. I'll focus on these right here, my 73 and my 80. In order to test the rule, I take the first number, in this case the input number, I write it down, that's 73. I apply my rule, so I think the rule is plus 7, so I will apply that, plus 7, and my answer should equal the output number. So let's see. 73 plus 7. 3 plus 7 equals 10. Put down the 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 7 equals 8. Is my output number 80? Yes, it is. So therefore, I know this is a good rule. The rule is definitely plus 7. So I have my rule. The next step is to find the number for the missing blank. And this will be part C. If I look at my machine, this green arrow shows where the blank is located. So let's see what I have. The box does not tell me what the input number is. If I knew the input number, I would use that, apply the rule, and I should get the answer of 57. But I don't know the input number, so therefore I'll have to put a blank there. I apply my rule, which is plus 7. I know it's a good rule because I already checked it. And when that's done, my answer should equal the output, which is 57. So I have blank plus 7 equals 57. Well, if I go back to the algebra that I learned in this chapter, how can we solve a problem like this? Well, remember, we can take that plus 7, we can move it to the other side and change the operation or do the inverse. The inverse of plus 7 is minus 7. So if I solve 57 minus 7, I'll figure out what the blank should be. Let's do that. 7 take away 7 is 0. 5 take away nothing is 5. So I think my blank should be 50. But let's double check to make sure it actually works. And I can do that now that I know that it's probably 50. So I'll say 50 plus 7 equals 57. And that's what I have right down there. So that is correct. 50 is the answer that goes into the blank on the machine box. So I'll go back to my original problem and put 50 in the box. And since the directions said to find the rule as well as fill in the empty box, underneath it I'll write down the rule equals add 7. Let's take a look at machine box B. And again, for box B, I need to find the rule and complete the empty box. And I know when I look at my numbers, if my numbers are increasing or getting larger, it needs to be either an addition or multiplication rule. Or if my numbers are decreasing or getting smaller, it needs to be a subtraction or division rule. So let's set myself up for the rule and check it out. I know that a rule has two parts, so I'll put my two lines. Let's take a look at my input and output numbers. First input number is 8. It turns into a 4. My next input number is 14. It turns into a 7. My input numbers are starting out larger and getting smaller. That means this needs to be either a subtraction or division rule. I again like to start with what I deem the easiest one first. So first I'm going to take a guess and see, is this a subtraction rule? I know for addition or subtraction rules, whether I'm putting plus or minus, I have to take the two numbers and subtract them. So what numbers will I look at to try this? My top input and output are completely filled in, so I'll use those numbers. I'll take my input number, which is the 8. I'll subtract my output number, which is the 4. And if this is a subtraction rule, that should tell me what my second blank is. 8 minus 4 equals 4. So that's what I believe my rule may be. As always, I need to go and test my rule to see if it works. That will be part B, test the rule. So to test my rule, I'm going to take any two different numbers that I have not used when I made the rule. So I'm going to take a look at my 14 and my 7. To test the rule, I take the first number, in this case it's the input number, which is 14. I apply the rule, which I think is minus 4, and that should equal my output, which is 7. So let's see, 14 minus 4. 4 take away 4 is 0, 1 take away nothing is 1. That equals 10. But my output number is not 10, it's 7. So no, this cannot be the correct rule because it doesn't test properly. So therefore I'm going to cross this out. It's not a subtraction rule, it's not minus 4. Cross out what I used to figure out what my rule might be. Cross out my test because this is all incorrect. Let's see what I do know. I know if it's not a subtraction rule, it then has to be a division rule, so I'll change that first blank to division. In order to figure out what my second blank is, I have to do a math problem with two numbers next to each other. So I'll go back to these first numbers of the 8 and 4. Now, for an addition or subtraction rule, I will always use a subtraction problem to find the second blank. But for a multiplication or a division rule, I will always use a division problem to find the second blank. I'll take the input number, which is 8. I'll divide by the next number, or the output, which is 4, and that should tell me what my rule is. 8 divided by 4 equals 2. So therefore, I'm believing that this rule is divide by 2. But as always, I will need to go ahead and check my rule with numbers other than the numbers I just used. So let's go back to these purple numbers. To check the rule, we take the input number, which is 14. We apply the rule, in this case is divided by 2, and if the rule is correct, it should equal the next number, which is my output. So 14 divided by 2 I know is 7, And right over here on my box, my output is 7, so that rule is good. It's correct. This is the correct rule, divide by 2. So I still need to fill in the missing blank in the box, and that will be step C. I look at my box and I say, where is that missing box? And it's right over here by this input number. My input is blank, my output is 2. Again, the input is the number I'm starting with, and I don't know what that is. So for this case, that would be blank. I apply the rule, which I figured out is divided by 2, and that should equal the output, which I do know, and the output is 2. This is like an algebra problem like we learned earlier in this chapter. Blank divided by 2 equals 2. We know that we can use the inverse of the operation and move it to the other side. So we can take this divided by 2, and we can move it to the other side and change it into times 2. So I can say 2 times 2 equals 4, and that's what my missing number should be. But let's go back and double check it, see if it really does work with the numbers that we had originally. If I have 4, and I say 4 divided by 2, does that equal 2? Yes, it does. So 4 is definitely my missing number. And I'll put that right into the box. Now let's go back to the original problem and fill that in. So my missing number is 4, and again it tells me to find the rule. And if I look at my work page, my final rule was divide by 2. So I will write down that my rule equals divide by 2. I found the rule for each box or each machine, and I filled in the empty box. Please stop and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Remember, go back to the video and follow it with me step by step. Good luck with problem number 1. And the missing number. Same directions as example number 1, but in this case, the machines or the tables are written horizontally rather than vertically. Let's focus in on letter A first. So in 2A we have this machine or this table, and here's what we need to remember. If our numbers are increasing or getting larger, it must be either an addition or a multiplication rule. If our numbers are decreasing or getting smaller, it must be either a subtraction or a division rule. I know that all rules have 2 parts, so I'll set myself up for my 2-part rule. I see my numbers, in to out. In is 57 turns to 39, or 34 turns to 16. Skip the blank, 28 turns to 10, or 74 turns to 56. So I know that all of my input numbers are getting smaller. Therefore, this must be either a subtraction or a division rule. I'll take a guess and start with subtraction first. In order to find the second blank of the rule, if it's an addition or subtraction rule, I find 2 numbers and subtract them. So I will take my first 2 numbers right here, my 57 and 39. 57 is the larger number that goes on top, minus 39. I'm ready to subtract. 7 take away 9, I can't do it. So I cross out the 5, make it a 4. The 7 turns into a 17. 17 take away 9 is 8. 4 take away 3 is 1. So if this is a subtraction rule, I believe the rule will be minus 18. Now I need to do part B, which is test or check the rule. And in order to test the rule, I need to take any 2 different numbers. So I'll look at my 34 and my 16. I take the first number, which is 34. I apply the rule, which I figured out was, I believe, is minus 18. And if the rule is correct, my answer should equal the output number, which is 16. So let's check it out and see. 4 take away 8. Can't do it, so I have to borrow. Cross out the 3, make it a 2. Turn the 4 into a 14. 14 take away 8 equals 6. 2 take away 1 equals 1. So my answer is 16. Let's go back to my table, and my answer should be 16. So that is correct, and I am happy that my rule checks out. I know that minus 18 is definitely the rule. So I'll erase my little question mark next to the minus sign. My next step is to find the missing box. So let's see where that's located. And right here in my table is the missing box. So this will be step C to solve the problem. My in number, I don't know what it is, so I'll put a blank. I apply the rule to that number. My rule is minus 18. And that will equal my out number, which I do know, which is 33. I found it right underneath that green arrow in the box. Again, this is an algebra problem. Blank minus 18 equals 33. And we know to solve this problem, we can circle our minus 18, bring it to the other side, and do the inverse of it, turning it into plus 18. So if I solve 33 plus 18, I'll figure out what my blank is. 3 plus 8 equals 11. Put down the 1, carry the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So I believe that that blank should be 51. Let's check it out to see. If it works correctly, 51 minus 18 would equal 33. So let's try it. 51, take away 18. 1 minus 8 can't do it. So I cross out the 5, make it a 4. That 1 turns into an 11. 11 minus 8 is 3. 4 minus 1 is 3. And yes, that's the number that it should be, which is 33. So that checks out perfectly. So I was correct. My missing number is 51. I'll write it in the table, and then I'll go back to put it in my problem. And here I am back at my original problem, so my missing number is 51. Remember, the directions also say find the rule that matches the function and then fill in the missing number. So I need to fill out that rule as well. And if I look back at my work page, my rule was minus 18. And I'll write that right underneath the table. The rule for this box, box A, is subtract 18. Let's take a look at box B. So as always, when figuring out a rule, I always have to remember two things. If my numbers are increasing or getting larger, it needs to be an addition or multiplication rule. If my numbers are decreasing or getting smaller, it will be a subtraction or division rule. So let's set myself up for my two-part rule. I wrote rule with my two blanks. So, if I want to decide whether it's addition or multiplication or subtraction or division, I look at my numbers. And my first in is 5, but there is no out. That's the one I'm going to have to fill in, so I'll ignore that and look at the others. So I have 4 turns to 12, 7 turns to 21, 6 turns to 18, and 3 turns to 9. These numbers are increasing, therefore this has to be an addition or a multiplication rule. I will try, get like a guess and check, try addition first and see if it's an addition rule. In order to get the second blank, whether it's addition or subtraction, I must subtract any two numbers that are next to each other. So I'll take a look at these two numbers right here, the 4 and the 12. Remember, when we subtract, we put the larger number on top. So I'm going to say 12 minus 4, and I know that 12 minus 4 equals 8. So if this is an addition rule, the rule would be plus 8. Now, as always, I need to test my rule to see if it works. When I test my rule, I have to find any two different numbers. So I'll look on my table right here at the 7 and 21. I'll take my input number, which is the 7. I'll apply my rule, which is plus 8. And if my rule is correct, my answer should equal the 21. So let's see. 7 plus 8 equals 15. That does not equal the 21. So nope. This is not the correct rule. I have to cross out my plus 8, not correct. Cross out the work that I did originally. Cross that out because none of this is going to work. It's not an addition rule. It must be a multiplication rule. So my first blank, I'll write down the times sign. And now in order to figure out the second part of a multiplication or division rule, I'll take any two numbers that are side by side and I will divide them. Take my 4 and my 12. So when I'm dividing, I start with my larger number. So I'll say 12 divided by 4. And I know that 12 divided by 4 equals 3. So this rule may be times 3. And I'll put the 3 right up in my second blank. As always, I'm going to test my rule. So I test it with different numbers. Let's go back to this purple section right here with the 7 and 21. So I take the input number of the first number, which is 7. I apply my rule, which I figured out was probably times 3, and if that is correct, if my rule is correct, my answer should equal the 21 that I see in the table. So 7 times 3 is 21, and that does equal this 21 right here. That's fantastic, it works out, so I know that times 3 is indeed the correct rule. Let's move on to step C, to solve for the missing number. I know that my missing number on my chart comes right here at the beginning. I know the input is 5, so I'll write down the 5. I apply the rule, which I figured out is times 3, and 5 times 3 equals 15. So my output should equal 15, and I'll write that right in the box. Let's go back and put this information into the original problem. So I know I need to fill in the box. My output is 15, and I'll need to find the rule, and we said the rule is times 3. Here I am back at the original problem. So my output is 15, that's my missing number, and we said the rule was times or multiply by 3. And that's my final answers. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 2 right now. Again, you can go back and do it with me step by step. Let's take a look at question number 3. Question number 3 is set up differently. It says, what's the next number in the sequence? 486, 162, 54, 18 blank. I need to figure out what that next number is. Well, anytime I have a sequence, in order to figure out what the sequence is, I have to find the rule. And I know what to do to find a rule. If my numbers are getting larger or increasing, it's either going to be an addition or a multiplication rule. If my numbers are getting smaller or decreasing, it's either going to be a subtraction or division rule. And I go from 486, 162, 54, 18. I know my numbers are decreasing or getting smaller. So set myself up for my rule. The rule always has 2 parts, so I'll put my 2 blanks. And if my numbers are decreasing or getting smaller, this has to be either a subtraction or a division rule. I'll take a guess at subtraction and try that one out first. Now, in order to find the second blank, if it's addition or subtraction, I have to subtract any 2 numbers that are side by side. So I will take my first number that's given to me, 486, and subtract the number that comes after it, 162. Go ahead and subtract. 6 take away 2 equals 4. 8 take away 6 equals 2. 4 take away 1 equals 3. So if this is a subtraction rule, the rule would be minus 324. So let's go ahead to step B and let's check the rule. Remember, when I'm checking a rule, I can't use the same 2 numbers that I used to find the rule. To find the rule, I used 486 and 162. But I can start with my 162, apply the rule, and if the rule is correct, it should equal the next number, which is 54. So let's see. 162, apply the rule, which we said is minus 324. The only problem is when I go to look at this problem, I say, I have a larger number on the bottom, 3 in the hundredths place for 324, and a smaller number on top, 162. I can't do a small number minus a large number. And I can't switch it around. I have to work in the order, take the number, apply the rule. So this is not possible, and this cannot be a subtraction rule. Let's cross all of these out. If it's not a subtraction rule, it has to be my other choice. So I'll write down division on my first rule line. This has to be a division rule. When I'm going to check a rule that's either multiplication or division, I'm going to take 2 numbers that are side by side, and I'm going to divide them to find the second blank for the rule. So I can take 486 divided by 162, but oh my goodness, that's a little bit scary. So if I'm going to do division for myself, I'd rather look at the smaller numbers here. I'm going to look at my 54 and my 18 since that's the smallest I have. So I'll say 54 divided by 18, whatever that answer is, should be the second blank of my rule. I've kind of run out of room here to do this division problem, so I'm going to move to the next page and shrink this up a bit so I have extra room to work. So we need to solve this problem that I wrote down, which is 54 divided by 18. I don't know my 18 times table, so I'm going to put it into the long division box. I don't know my 18 times table, so I'm going to use my scrap paper. Let's find my Hershey bars first. If my brother or sister has 18 of my favorite snack and I have 5, am I happy? No. If I have 54, am I happy? Yes. So this is going to be a 1 chocolate bar answer. Don't know my 18 times table, so I'm going to use my scrap paper, and I'm going to do my 18 times 1 times 5 and times 10. So 18 times 1 is easy, that's 18. 18 times 5, 5 times 8 is 40. Put down the 0, carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 4 is 9, so it would be 90. And of course 18 times 10 is going to be 18, and tack on that 0 to give me 580. I know that I need a number as close as possible to 54 without going over it. 18 times 1 is 18, 18 times 5 is 90. I feel like 54 is somewhere in the middle of that. So I'm going to try 18 times 3. 8 times 3 is 24, put down the 4, carry the 2. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 2 is 5. Oh, that's perfect. So that is going to be a 3. 3 times 18 equals 54. 54 minus 54 is 0. There's nothing to bring down, so my answer is 3. So therefore, I believe that my new rule will be divide by 3, so I put a 3 by the second blank of the rule. Now I'm going to go back and test my rule. So I can take my 162, apply the rule, which I now believe is divide by 3, and let's see if this rule works. Okay, well, that's a large number. I don't know 3 times anything that equals 162, so I'm going to turn it into a long division problem. 162 divided by 3. Does 1 get a chocolate bar? No. Does 16 get a chocolate bar? Yes, it does, so this is a 2-digit answer. 3 goes into 16 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. I'm going to subtract. 6 take away 5 is 1. 1 take away 1 is nothing. 1 is less than 3. That's good. Bring down my 2. So 3 is going to go into 12 4 times. 4 times 3 equals 12, and 12 minus 12 is 0. Perfect. So my answer should be 54, and if I look back in my chart, yes, 54 is the next number, so therefore I know the rule divide by 3 is the correct rule. Now I need to fill in the last blank, and that will be step C. So I'll take the number in front of the blank, which is 18. I'll apply the rule, which is divide by 3, and that should give me what the missing number is. And I know that 18 divided by 3 equals 6. So my missing number should be 6. And I write it right into the blank that was given. All this question asks is what is the next number in the sequence, and I filled in that 6, which is my next number, so I'm done with this problem. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 3 with me right now. Again, go back with the video and solve it with me step by step. Good luck with this problem. Let's take a look at example number 4, another way that you might see one of these problems. Number 4 says Emma wants to know what rule explains this pattern. 13, 78, 468, 2808. Well, anytime I want to know a rule, I need to remember 2 things. If the numbers are increasing or getting larger, it needs to be an addition or a multiplication rule. If the numbers are decreasing or getting smaller, it needs to be a subtraction or a division rule. I'll set myself up for my rule. As always, I write the word rule with 2 blanks because all rules have 2 parts. Go back and look at my numbers. I have 13, 78, 468, 2808. My numbers are definitely getting larger, so I know that this has to be either an addition or a multiplication rule. I'll take a guess and check and try an addition rule first. For the second part of the blank, if it's addition or subtraction, I take 2 numbers that are side by side. I subtract larger minus smaller. So I'm going to subtract my 78 minus my number in front of it, which is the 13. 8 take away 3 is 5. 7 take away 1 is 6. So I believe that my rule may be plus 65. As always, I need to test or check my rule. In order to check my rule, I'm going to take this number right here, 78. I'm going to apply my rule. So I have 78, my rule is plus 65. Add them together, and if the rule is correct, it should equal the next number listed there, which is 468. So 8 plus 5 equals 13. Put down the 3, carry the 1. 1 plus 7 is 8, and 8 plus 6 equals 14. 143 does not equal 468. So no, this does not work. This cannot be my rule. So it's definitely not addition. Cross it out. It's not plus the 65. Cross out all of the things that I've tried because they do not work. If it's not an addition rule, it must be a multiplication rule, so I'll change my first blank of rule to a times sign. Remember, if it's a multiplication or division rule, I'm going to take any two numbers that are side by side and divide them to find out what my second blank of the rule is. So I'm going to say my 78 divided by the number in front of it, which is 13. And let's see if that tells me what my correct rule is. I don't know my 13 times table, so I'm going to need to turn this into a long division problem with scrap. Let me move to a next page, make this smaller, so I have room to work. Okay, so I'll take my 78 and divide it by 13. Find my chocolate bars. My brother or sister has 13 of my favorite snack. I have 7. Am I happy? Nope. I have 78. Am I happy? Yes, I am. This is a 1 chocolate bar answer. Let's set up my scrap since I don't know my 13 times tables by heart, and I'll do 13 times 1, 13 times 5, and 13 times 10. Well, 13 times 1 I know is 13. 13 times 5, we'll figure it out. 5 times 3 is 15. Put down the 5, carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. 13 times 10 I know is 13 times 1 is 13. Tack on that extra 0. I need 13 to go into 78 as close as possible without going higher. Well, 13 times 5, 65 is pretty close. Let's try 6 just to check it out and be sure. So I'm going to say 6 times 3 is 18, put down the 8, carry the 1. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Oh, that's perfect. So my answer will be 6. 13 times 6 is 78. 78 minus 78 is 0. So I do believe that my rule should be times 6, and I'll put the 6 in that second blank for the rule. Again, go back and check my rule. I'm going to take the number that I put the purple arrow at, this 78 right up here, and I'll say 78. I'll apply the rule, which is times 6, and if that's correct, my answer should equal 468. So let me work this out on some scrap paper. 78 times 6. 6 times 8 equals 48. Put down the 8, carry the 4. 6 times 7 is 42. Plus 4 equals 46. And yep, that works out correctly. 468 is the number it needed to be. So times 6 is definitely my rule. Now, this doesn't ask me to fill in any extra blanks. It simply says that Emma wants to know what rule explains the pattern. And I do believe I've already figured out the rule, which is times 6. Let's write down this final answer. Either of these ways that I'm going to show you would be considered correct. But you should definitely write down that it's the rule, so we know it's the rule. So I'm going to write down rule equals times for times sign 6. Or I could say the rule is multiply by 6. You might see it either way, and you can write it either way. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 4 right now.